Are we on the air?
Give them 1 minute.
What, need a minute?
Why is this asking me to sign in again?
Normally he's looking.
I
I think we're on. Are we? Hey, Ben, you ready to lead us in the pledge? Are we on?
Yep, we can go.
Okay, there we are. Welcome to Tuesday, February 14th, 2023, our Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Board meeting. Meeting to order and do the Pledge of Allegiance. You stand.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which
it
it
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you. Good evening. And right now, our next item is to any public comment from anybody in the audience that wants to speak to us on an item that's not on the agenda. You can. Wes, go ahead. I think you're on the agenda, though, too, Wes, so. Well, that's usually what we do. If this is something that's not on the agenda, yeah, you'll get your turn, okay? You're at item 4.5, okay? All right, anybody else? I've not seen anybody. Well, next item is to approve the agenda for tonight. And anybody want to make a motion or motion by Frank, second by Ben? Any additions or deletions by staff? None? Okay, I'm not seeing any changes in the agenda, so all in favor of the agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's approved. So now we're going to go to old and new business. First up is programs and project update by staff. Somebody in staff.
Hello, welcome. Jumping right into our cart management update. We have used our radio tagged carp to determine that an aggregation has occurred in Spring Lake. Right now we have 3 of the 5 tags in what is considered the traditional seine hall. We were supposed to have a carp removal event today using our local commercial seine netter, and the weather deterred them and postponed it till Thursday. Good news is that the aggregation is shown to be of good size, and all the conditions for a successful seine are green, and so we're looking forward to Thursday. We're also looking forward to using some of the district's tools carp in Upper Prior Lake shortly after this Spring Lake event. Good news on the carp front. In addition to the carp, staff has been conducting some winter monitoring activities. This includes snow coring throughout the district, measuring snow depth and snow water equivalents. This will be used to estimate potential rise in water on Spring Lake, and that's really in coordination with Prior Lake outlet structure operations. We've also been monitoring dissolved oxygen in lakes and ponds. This is to look at how the oxygen levels may be affecting fish health. What we've seen so far is that oxygen levels are extremely low in some of the smaller lakes and ponds where fish kills have already begun to occur. So we've noted low oxygen and fish kill conditions. We use some of this data to help determine and predict where carp and bluegill, where carp may be surviving and where bluegill stocking should occur. We've also been conducting chloride monitoring, and this is to look at, we do it in the summer, but in the winter, some of the chloride and salinity levels and conductivity levels change, and this is due to chloride from road salt runoff. We're noticing every year in conductivity rising, but it's not occurring in chloride where the state standard occurs. It's an interesting dynamic. The chloride levels in our lakes are well below the state standard. It's right around, the state standard's 230 milligrams per liter. What we're seeing is around 50 to 60 milligrams per liter. So we're going to continue monitoring for a couple more weeks throughout this winter. And this is used to build on some of these long-term trends.
Okay, I'll start off with the projects update. Slides are going to be some report outs on cost share projects we did with Soil and Water Conservation District. These came from the last report. There's a lot of good work that happened last year and that I was for, so luckily Triku falls in the audience if you have any specifics. But one of the first projects here is a well decommissioning. Unused well on a property was sealed, and that helps to protect groundwater resources from pollution. So we contributed some to that. We also contributed to another well decommissioning in a more urban area. This one was in their home, and to protect groundwater resources. We also contributed to a filter strip project. So this establishes and maintains vegetation along a stream, which helps slow the runoff and reduce sedimentation that goes into the water. Environmental benefits at the bottom of the slide there, and the contract is a term of 10 years. So some pretty great last benefits from this site. Another cost share project was some conservation cover at Shelley Anderson's property. This looked at planting native prairie on 4.3 acres of their previously cropped acreage. And this was also a contract term of 10 years. So you can see the cost per ton or pound here as well for those benefits. Reduces runoff and also adds pollinator habitat. I think the last couple slides, which I'm flying through fast here, are cover crop, and you can see that the acreage here denoted on the map, 6.1 acres, so quite a lot, was cover cropped this year. That reduced runoff and erosion and has a benefit to the water in the area. This contract was for 3 years. The next several slides, you'll see different term lengths. And we're going through these quickly, but something to note with the unit costs, the reason that they will differ is there's several factors that contribute to that. So one being the term of the contract. Some are 1 year versus 3 years versus even 10. And then also just the taking into how people were using their land before. So if they were worse land managers to start with, and these practices improved it a lot, then we're going to get a bigger benefit for our dollars spent. Similarly, if the landscape is more erosive than others, then we'll see a better cost per pound there. So just wanted to point that out as you're noticing those differences. Great. Oh, thank you. So this is similarly another cover crop project on 45 acres on Marvin Clare's property here by Swan. And you can see the reduction of soil erosion, sediment, and phosphorus there. Similarly, another Clare family, Richard and Pamela, cover cropping on 6.7 acres, so slightly smaller location. And lastly, we worked with Soil and Water to line a waterway on property. This was a eroding drainage swale, which would have been traditionally covered by cost share up to 90% of the costs. There was really no incentive for the landowner to pay that additional 10%, so you all decided in meetings to help foot that extra 10% to get the benefits that we saw on the site, which is reduction of sediment and nutrient loading to County Ditch 13 and then therefore Spring Lake. So this was a great project that wouldn't have happened with that extra little push, and you can see the difference in those pictures. It's quite stark. This has a lifetime of 15 years, so it's also a lasting impact as well. So those are the cost share projects. I'll just take a beat in case there were any questions on those before I move to others.
The last project you mentioned, I think he also has a big portion of land that he has converted into prairie restoration, I believe. Is that correct? Yep. So it's a number of things he has done on that property with a lot of help from Soil and Water Conservation District. So.
Yeah, you can see through that slew of slides how much we're able to accomplish with the partnership of Soil and Water, so it's really great to build off of those relationships. And you'll see that continuing in the next slides as well. This is, I'm going to touch on the upper watershed projects I'm working on. This first slide is just in general. I'm in a phase of outreach for all of these projects, whether they have a completed feasibility or just conceptual and have been approved and included in the budget. Our approach this year and going forward is to really work with landowners to make sure that the concepts we're moving forward and moving to feasibility are something that they can envision working on their property so that we have implementable projects. So I have worked with Soil and Water closely, and our real estate specialists that we've retained to work off of relationships to start that outreach. And my goal is that we reach all of those landowners for those proposed project sites by the end of the month. Of course, people are different levels of responsiveness, and in Florida, so we'll see, but that's my goal, and I think that'll really help push these projects forward. So that'll apply to all of these projects I'm talking about. The first area I want to talk about progress that we've made is Sutton Lake. You all know that we have drafted a lake management plan for that water body. I am still working with DNR to respond to their comments on the plan. We did receive the first draft of comments, some additional questions as well, so we're going back and forth and still seeking some clarity on what our drawdown and vegetation management options are there. Once we have a clear vision and are on the same page, then that'll be brought forward to the board. I'm hopeful that that will be in March. Additionally, we conducted a feasibility study for an iron enhanced sand filter just downstream of Sutton Lake Outlet. And so we are looking at that site, following up on landowner concerns, and also conducting some preliminary assessment of alternate sites in the area. So lots of landowner follow-up. Another project that we'll be reaching out to landowners on is Spring West, and there are 2 project sites for this one. That aerial map shows a general region for both of these projects. One is wetland enhancement, so we'll be working with the landowner and determining the intersection with development plans that are proposed. There's also 2 proposed sites for an iron-enhanced sand filter in that area. So those will be 2 different landowners and 2 different kind of processes to figure out what's possible there. That iron-enhanced sand filter process will have to work in conjunction with the county to figure out how it's going to align with their roadway realignment also. We also will be continuing on with development on the Buck East wetland. Joni and I met with one of the main landowners last month and received some really good follow-up questions and interests and concerns, so I'll be digging into those and getting back to see what of the 4 concepts that were proposed will be amenable to landowner willingness. That project is also, feasibility study is in draft form, and we have not received comments back from DNR on that. So once I do receive those that'll come back to the board for final approval. Another project I'll be working on is looking at drafting an RFP. Our ferric chloride treatment system just upstream of Spring Lake is in need of an assessment of where our ferric chloride tank is in its lifetime, and also when we do replace it, looking at proposals for how we can do that system update in the most effective way, looking at efficiency rates of the application of ferric chloride, and just overall the design of that. This process will be in tangent with the Geis Wetland Flood Storage Project, because that proposal would potentially raise the water levels and impact this site. So we'd need to look at that as well in a potential design.
Wilson did a good presentation where he reviewed like where is the iron chloride plant function right now, and following up on that, we also discussed what are some of the potential. Carl Almer, our engineer, was mentioning that there are a number of different possibilities for optimizing the function of it. So I hope you will look at that as well. The thing that's important about the iron chloride plant here is that right now is the only structure that removes phosphorus from ditch 13 before it comes into Spring Lake. So function is important and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Morkeberg. Yes, I have met with Jeff already, and we're working together to make sure that that RFP would include consideration of all options to make sure that that is functioning the best it can. We also have some projects in the upper watershed that have received watershed-based implementation funding that comes from Bowser. So those, you'll see them on your consent agenda. The work plan and budget was approved by Bowser this last month, and so we are, you'll see the agreement with Bowser on the consent agenda, as well as consultant agreements as well to conduct this work. The Swamp Lake phosphorus and peak flow reduction would look at building most likely an iron-enhanced sand filter coming off of Swamp downstream of Swamp Lake. The reason the language is ambiguous is to build in some room in case an iron-enhanced sand filter isn't the best option, that another best management practice could be applied, although it's anticipated that that would be a probable solution for that. The peak flow, touching on the fact that we would want to build an outlet out of Swamp Lake, that would control the flow so that the flow would be moderated and go into the iron filter for the most efficient phosphorus removal. That language is directed to the Bowser funding source, which is water funding and focused on water quality. Swamp Lake has also been considered internally as a flood storage option, so there's potential for the outlet to also serve that purpose, although this agreement is focused on water quality. And then the other project funded by Bowser under this agreement would be the Fish Lake Management Plan. That is looking at where the phosphorus loading is coming from in Fish Lake, whether internal or external, so that we can inform our future management decisions from there. So you'll also that consultant agreement in the consent agenda. And then lastly, just touching on some flood storage projects and review. Again, these are projects I'm beginning outreach on. Projects 6 and 1 were selected by the Board of Managers to be pursued in 2023, the first ones. We also submitted an MPC grant application to help supplement that work, and that we should hear back mid-February, so soon, on if we were successful in that. Have not heard anything yet. And again, just working with landowners to discern what's possible in these sites. Any questions?
Any questions from anybody? Christian?
No, I'm pleased to see the many projects that you're bringing up here, and I wish you very good luck and put in a lot of effort. There's a lot to do, I think, and work with our partners to make it as palatable, as beneficial for the landowners and as well as for the watershed district, and so hopefully we get something done. It would be nice if we were able to really spend good money on it this year and get moving on it. That would be wonderful. But thank you for getting all these little, these are not even small projects, but all these projects set up. And I think you mentioned at our workshop that you also spoke with Troy from Soil and Water Conservation District on project number 4 and 5, which may be another good option to move with that. And so usually say you should be focused and get a few things done well, but on the other hand, I also think it's very good to have this broad net and try and really move on some of these projects here in the very near future, so we can improve the water quality and hopefully have some flood reduction wins as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just had one quick question on grants. Are they matching, what kind of a match or grants are we looking at, or?
So the WBIF funding is a match. I don't know on top of my head how much we are matching, but they are funding roughly 82,000. And
Yeah, I was thinking more of the MPCA grant you mentioned.
yes, so there is a match required on that. We went above the required match for competitiveness or matrix. We would be matching, I believe, applying for 25% of the project funds and matching 75.
Okay. And when would we know about those grants? Do we have any idea?
For the MPCA, they said 6 weeks, which is around now, and I haven't heard. So
Okay.
we'll see.
It's probably in the mail, so maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully. All right, any other questions for anybody? Report, thank you. Is that it for programs and project? Okay. So now we're going to go to a Scott SWCD annual report presentation by Mr. Troy Kupo. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you, President Loney and managers. It's a pleasure to get to spend some time with you again. It is the February 14th, so I'm going to try to be quick with my comments and then just maybe spend more time in discussion if you have questions, and we can move from there. So your pack is a summary of our accomplishments from last year. So we do some high-level numbers at a glance. You can see from the the information in front of you. We had a few more requests for conservation landowners who contact our office seeking help on just any number of different conservation interests or concerns. The number of landowners we assist is a little bit higher as well, reflective of that. The number of approved projects and cost share applications is running fairly steady over the past couple of years. You'll notice the phosphorus and sediment reductions are down a bit, and I'll kind of get into that a little bit in the report. Cover crops as well. Still respectable numbers though. Stream flow measurements past year, the level of service we provided the district is different than previous years. More limited to stream flow rather than any water quality sampling. But the numbers that you see there are reflective of the drought. So similar to 2021, 22 wasn't much better. So just moving on from there, introduction. So the Soil and Water, as you know, provides a variety of different conservation services to the district. Our goal is to help you implement your water plan and achieve your goals. So that's what our partnership means to us. And we'll work in any endeavor to help achieve that and advance that goal. We do that through an annual service agreement. Last year, that agreement was about $130,000. A little bit less than half of that is for funding for projects, so we call that pass-through. Those are dollars that go out to landowners to do conservation work. A little bit more than half goes for actual services themselves. So I'm going to kind of hit on two areas which I feel represent the main interest of the board in terms of the metrics we look at, and that is projects or efforts that achieve specific phosphorus and sediment reductions. The first one being the cost share program. So we work with landowners to increase awareness and to put conservation on. That's reflective in some of the information that Emily shared on those cost share fact sheets. So our goal in looking at any project is, are we going to achieve progress towards meeting the reduction goals specific to phosphorus, sediment, and flood reduction. So those are the projects that we focus the time and the efforts on. We don't limit our service to just those. We try to balance that focus and that with the interest of the residents within the watershed. So we try to take a holistic approach and work with any landowner that's has interest or needs assistance to build that awareness within the community and positive relationships. So we try not to turn down folks seeking assistance. You'll notice, pointing to the graphs on the bottom, these are the reduction numbers based on the calculations we use standard countywide for our BMPs, our best management practice installations. Just comparing 2020 against 2021 and 22, you can see this year was fairly much higher relative to previous years. But I just caution, that's years. These numbers can vary widely from one year to the next based on the projects on the ground, landowner interest. The last couple years really low, but this year, it spiked, and next year could be something higher in between or lower again. Trends over time. We don't try to just take a look at, a single year and say, well, doing better or not. We want to look more long term. So that's just a word of caution when looking at these numbers. Phosphorus is always in pounds per year, and sediment is in tons per year. The lower right-hand graph shows the reduction over the whole period from 2016 to 22. My goal is to actually present eventually a 10-year track record. So we're building up to that with 2016 kind of. So the numbers are similar for that in terms of seeing a bigger increase compared to previous years, with a total of a little over 14 acre feet over the 2016 to 22 period. While wetland restoration and flood storage projects would represent a typical scenario, storage and runoff reduction, for us, change in landscape is a bigger piece of that. So converting an agricultural field, for example, to native prairie, it's a huge runoff reduction. Anytime we can exchange or convert tilled conditions into perennial vegetation, you obviously are going to see increased infiltration, less runoff. One of the things we feel we can bring to the district is other sources of funding, and that's what's presented in the paragraph there called pass-through cost share expenditures. So as in previous years, the percentage of a district fund towards a project, we try to keep that as minimal as possible, and we always leverage state and federal funds whenever we can to make those local funds go further. Over the course of the last 6-7 years, so since 2016, the district has put in about a little less than 22% of all the project funds that towards projects has been the district share of that. It's very similar to the landowner share, and the balance of that is what the soil and water can bring through various grants. So that's really our goal, is to, like, again, minimize the amount of district has to put towards these projects so they can use those funds on other efforts within the district. It also helps with really the cost benefit. So the less, obviously, the district put towards these projects, the better its cost benefit in terms of dollars per pound of phosphorus or dollars per ton of sediment. The green graph there shows kind of that same concept over time since 2016, with the dark, I'm showing the Prior Lake Spring Lakes percent or portion of the total funding that's gone through projects. The middle green area is the part that soil and water contributes, and then the top part, the lighter green, represents the landowner share. So you can see the amount of money that is dedicated towards project varies significantly from year to year, but generally speaking, you see the district and the landowner share being the smaller portions, and the piece that soil and water can contribute through grants is the larger piece of that. Moving on to the next page, 14-year packet. On the top is a table listing of various practices that we installed. These, however, are not the types of practices that we would associate with pollution reduction. However, they are eligible for cost share projects, and they do contribute value in different ways. Nutrient management sounds like it's one that you would be able to put a reduction number on, especially for nitrogen or phosphorus, but it's very difficult to pin down. Reason being is that nutrient management isn't always about putting less nutrients on the ground. It's about putting the right amount of nutrients in the right area at the right time. There are scenarios, it's quite common, where there are certain areas of a field, for example, that has high variability, where you would see phosphorus levels way below what the desired levels should be in the soil. And therefore, nutrient management might call for an increased use in phosphorus to meet the demands of the crop and to build that soil to optimum levels. On the other hand, you might see areas within a field that are very high in phosphorus concentrations, soil concentrations, and you draw them down. So nutrient management is about balancing for optimum crop yield, but also reduced risk for runoff. And knowing exactly how that results in actual reductions from a field is very difficult to model, so we try not to. Well decommission is another one where it's more protection, preventing the possibility of contamination of groundwater through either unintentional or intentional dumping down a well casing, for example. And turf conversion has minimal quantifiable benefits. Well, there always are benefits from anytime you convert a turf landscape that is, treated with, pesticides and fertilizers into a more natural state. But really, calculating that is difficult. And so we list those three practices separately because you can't really compare, they're not really comparable to practices that are really intended to provide pollution reduction benefits. But in addition, they also have benefits that are landowner engagement, education, awareness, and participation in programs that are pro-water quality. So we feel that's important to keep those types of practices as well as those that have more quantifiable benefits. So that's why that information is presented. And then the practices with measurable phosphorus benefits are listed there. So we're looking over the course, again, of several years, in this case 2016 through 22, and just calculating each of those practices. What has the total phosphorus reduction been? What has the district share been for each of those practices? And then breaking that down to look at dollars per pound. So that's your cost benefit. Where are we getting the biggest bang for the buck? So, and again, just a word of caution, these numbers are highly variable from year to year. It depends on the quality of projects we have, the number of projects we have in any given year can flip these numbers. So we're looking at building that data set. So hopefully we'll look at over a 10-year period, which will give us a better long-term average for what's being achieved. Worthy of note is you can see filter strips and grass waterways are probably the most cost-effective practices, as well as conservation cover. Part of that might just be due to the portion of these projects that the watershed district contributes. It might be less, even though maybe the practice itself overall might not be as cost-effective. The fact that we've contributed more funding to them outside of the district would make it much more cost-effective on the district side. The next area that I just want to cover quickly is the Farmer-Led Council. So the two primary incentive programs at the Farmer-Led Council programs cover are the cover crop, promoting cover crops, and the lake-friendly farm. So we get in kind of detail on those. This past year, I'll note, wasn't a great cover crop year, as some of the numbers show. Just the continuing drought leads to really undesirable or unfavorable conditions for cover crops, just especially any type of aerial seeding, either from a plane that would aerial seed or from the different type of aerial seeder implements. The results that we saw from those types of application were not very good. Just wasn't enough moisture on the surface of the ground to promote germination. The better luck we had was with the seed that was direct seeded, drilled, if you will, into the ground, following a crop such as maybe corn silage was taken off and we'd see into that, or soon after soybeans were harvested, seeding into those. So those are two examples of where we did see more favorable results. Lake-friendly farm, we didn't do any certifications this year. It's just a matter of timing. We had a number of farms that we started that on. We just didn't get the certifications done, so I didn't want to report them prematurely. But looking at the graph on their screen there, you'll see the overall phosphorus reductions from these farmer-led program initiatives. On the phosphorus, it's 141 pounds, and then for the sediment, 102. So again, significantly down. Worth noting is that due to the fact that we didn't get of acres that we had predicted we put in, actually we didn't get them accomplished. We did carry over funds from this year for projects that we intended to do but are now going to be postponed, so that hopefully that'll make up for next year or this year some of the we didn't get done next year will be planted. So we anticipate seeing those numbers rebound again. Similar to the cost share program, I provide there in the middle of that page just a breakdown for phosphorus cost benefits, so we can see, how we're doing in terms of achieving phosphorus reductions per dollar spent. Cover crops, you'll see overall $64 per pound, and then the lake-friendly farm is only $1.33, perhaps our most cost-effective practice. Reason being is that we really don't provide a lot of incentive or need to provide a lot of incentive for this lake-friendly farm certification. For the 780 plus acres that have been installed, the producer for the most part has made changes without actually needing any incentive. So, and we're seeing that trend continue as well. We'll go to the next page. On the green graph there just kind of gives you a graphic representation of the cover crop acres. Again, it was down, again, to the drought. Farms certification, we're still sitting at about 13.5% of the watershed, the cropland within the watershed being covered under lake-friendly farm certified plans. And finally, what I present there is just some information on workshops. These are the 4 workshops we held that benefited district residents. 2 of them, the Growing Healthy Soils Part 1 and Part 2, were actually led by the watershed district themselves, utilizing some grant funds that they. And I'll just wind up my presentation by a summary of the budget. So again, we had close to $130,000 in the budget. We invoiced for $122,000 total, leaving a balance of $6,940. And then in the gray area are other contributions, just showing pieces of the parts of services that the soil and water provides that benefit landowners and district goals without actually those were not charged to the district. So the $6,000 plus represents landowners' contribution towards projects, and the $63,000 is more services provided to landowners within the district that aren't included in this agreement. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll try to answer any questions if there board has any.
Thank you, Troy. A very, very informative report as always. Any questions for Troy that anybody may have? I have just one. There is quite a difference between cover crop and lake-friendly farms. What's the difference? What do they do in a lake-friendly farm that gives them such a high, such a cost is so low?
So a big portion of that has to do with change in cropping practices. For example, one of the criteria in lake-friendly farms is that any land within 300 feet of a water body or high-value wetland requires a cropping management strategy that limits soil erosion than 2 tons per acre. A typical tolerable soil loss value is about 10 ton or 5 tons per acre. So it's 50%. So what happens is that the producer would change their management by changing their cropping rotations, their direction, maybe do more no-till, put in filter strips, and do these other sorts of practices, again, mostly on their own. So that's the big difference, is there's not a lot of input and incentives needed to achieve some of these changes. And we work with the farmer on things that are reasonable and practical within their production ag system. So they're practices that make sense, that are doable, that are reasonable, but don't necessarily represent a inconvenience.
So there are farmers out there who want to get the certification basically on there's no incentive.
There's a $5 an acre incentive. That's
That's it?
kind of it, yep. And we've had a couple without actually taking the incentive, so, yeah.
That might be something to look at to incentivize. Because it seems like that's
You know, I
very,
kind of agree with that, because it really does, it does two things. Number one is we do get a significant quantifiable benefit. The other is it's one way to actually track and calculate the percentage of landscape within the district or crop landscape within a district that is meeting these rigorous standards. So it's measurable, and it goes a long way in being able to tell the story how the farming community is doing their part. And the more acres we get lake friendly certified, the more we can say the farmers are doing not only, you know, what's traditionally expected of them, but also the more rigorous standards that are set to meet this higher bar. So, yeah, 13.7 is a good start, but we're not going to be happy until we get
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, I just look at the cost per pound of
Yep.
phosphorus, 1.33, that's the best deal.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
to your point, it may make sense because of, there's room in there to maybe add incentives and still make it really a cost-effective
Yeah.
thing to do. So
Right.
we can look at that.
That's what I was looking at. Any other questions, board members? Matt?
I have one. Troy, just out of curiosity, what constitutes a high-value wetland from, I would assume, low-value wetlands?
So I think Carl could answer that question almost better than me. There's really different tools or assessments used to identify, and it's what's it function it serves in terms of water storage, water retention, filtering, wildlife habitat, vegetation quality. There's a host of different parameters you look at, and I think those were all kind of used in developing the wetland management plan the district did at least 10 years ago, if not more. Typically, a higher valuable wetland would be one that has a high level of diversity, has an area where water can impound. So you might have maybe some open, shallow water, some deeper water, but also a nice wide fringe of diverse vegetation that can act as buffering. So those are kind of examples of what a higher value wetland would exhibit.
Thank you. I was had a little curiosity, and
Yep.
thanks again.
But they're all valuable.
I got that. Thanks again for the tour last year.
Oh, my pleasure, anytime.
It was very, very informative. Thanks.
I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Troy, thank you for your, we're making strides, I guess, in year by year, right?
We certainly are.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And now we're going to talk about the Scott SWCD 2023 Professional Service Agreement. You're up.
President Loney?
Oh, wait. Do you have a question, Christian?
Yes, I just wanted to thank Troy Kufo for the presentation, and I looked at also at your proposal for the budget for this year here, and the fact that we are expanding our services with you, which we very much appreciate and look forward to. And yeah, in general, we really look forward to working more with you the coming years. So thank you.
Okay.
President Loney and managers. So as Troy has just shared with you, the Soil and Water Conservation District does provide a lot of valuable services to help the district implement our water resource management plan. And so on an annual basis, we do interact with Soil and Water Conservation District for the services that they provide. In the contract proposal for 2023, A lot of the line items associated with cost share, farmer-led council, monitoring, education, and outreach are pretty comparable to what they have been in the previous years, maybe $1,000, increase here and there. But I wanted to highlight two new tasks that we have, that we're proposing to retain Soil and Water to assist the district on. In particular, permitting. Right now, the district does not have a permit coordinator, and through conversations with Troy and staff at Soil and Water Conservation District, we believe that Soil and Water can provide and assist the district in many of its permitting activities and tasks. So the contract does include $49,000 for their assistance, which is less than the cost of a permit coordinator if we had hired one on our own. In addition, we also have a line item, it's called Upper Watershed Landowner Liaison Consulting, and that's $4,000, once again, to leverage soil and water relationships with landowners in the Upper Watershed, and to have them help us make contact with these individuals and make introductions for the watershed district to help us once again host some of those conversations. Then I also did want to indicate that attached to the contract is also Soil and Water's Conservation Practice Financial Assistance Program Policy Manual, commonly called just the Cost Share Docket. In previous years, there was a specific appendix to that stated that that the watershed district would not participate in cost share associated with implementation of rain gardens. And then by kind of relation, the Soil and Water also then did not also ask the watershed district for any funding to implement any sort of pollinator gardens that they were helping landowners with within the district. This draft of the contract, we are bringing that back into funding for the district for the manager's consideration. With looking at the cost share docket, the dollar values to fund rain gardens are really relatively low. It is basically $250 for a rain garden that's less than 300 square feet, or $500 for a rain garden that is larger than 300 square feet. And the reason why staff is proposing that this be brought back again is that individually, I mean, these are pretty small dollars, and we really feel that rain gardens themselves do provide good public education, and that the vegetation within these rain gardens are typically very supportive of pollinators. We do realize that, yes, on a practice-by-practice basis, yes, they do tend to be the most expensive per cost per phosphorus removed, but we also believe that there are other benefits that the rain gardens do provide. But once again, this is for the manager's consideration, and also to include funding for the pollinator garden program that Soil funds, which I believe they do also typically historically have received a lot of grant funds to help implement that, so it would be highly leveraged with other funding. And then lastly, I would just like to highlight that in the cost share docket, there is now also a new clause in there that highlights that if there is a project that is a high priority project for like Spring Lake Watershed District that is possibly included in one of our approved feasibility studies or in a capital improvement project, that we now have the ability to provide more funding to that project. Otherwise, previously, just the way that the cost share was structured, it was prohibitive. It really required that each landowner contribute to the project before it could move forward. This now removes that restriction so that if there is a project that is a high priority for the district, we have the ability to provide additional funding to keep that project moving forward, to increase the incentive for the property owner to go forward with it. So with that, I would recommend approval of the Scott County, or the Scott Soil and Water 2023 Professional Services Agreement.
Okay, so if you're asking for the improvement of the agreement, is that also the docket, everything,
That is correct.
the whole thing? And where was the rain garden budgeting? Whereabouts was that again? I'm not seeing that.
Well,
Is it built in somewhere?
President Loney, if you look through the cost share docket, there is a pay item, I believe it's called natural vegetation, natural landscaping, which is item 312 in the cost share docket, which identifies the sources or basically the cost share aspects for these various projects. But then typically in the very back of that cost share docket, there's an Appendix A. And then under Appendix A, there's a section 1.2, which in the past had a line item that said Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District would not participate in the cost share docket as it related to rain gardens. And that clause now has been removed from the appendix.
Are these rain gardens people request, or how do they come about as a project?
It is my understanding that these are initiated by the property owners.
Okay. Do we get a lot of requests?
I'm going to defer that to Troy if he's willing to step back up to the mic. Just for the fact that we haven't participated for the last couple of years, I'm not sure.
President Loney, managers, so depends how you qualify a lot, but relatively speaking, we get more interest in your watershed than anywhere else in the county.
Okay. Just give me a number.
Yeah, maybe a dozen.
A dozen a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't do that many a year. Maybe half a dozen we could do a year, just based on, the time it takes from the moment somebody asks for assistance to when the project actually gets installed. And if I might just point out one additional aspect there. So there are two ways to manage your priorities when it comes to the cost share program. One is to decide whether or not it's even eligible for funding. And the other is to assign a level of your budget that would actually go towards those projects. So the point that Joni was making was that the amount of dollars that are actually provided towards a rain garden is small. But in addition, if you look at the total budget for the cost share program, let's just say there's $50,000 there. The board and or its staff can say, well, we don't want to dedicate more than 10% or 20% of our all budget to even go towards those projects. So not only do you limit the amount that goes towards a single project, but overall, your decision on limiting the portion of funds that go to it can also be reflective of wanting to make that as a priority practice. So in other words, we wouldn't spend the total cost budget on gardens. So it's just another way to look at the ability you have to assign dollars and reflective of your priorities.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just trying to get a handle on the magnitude. It doesn't sound like it's a big dollar amount. I understand some people don't like rain gardens, so I wanted to raise the question. I look if they provide multi-benefit, if they do provide some infiltration, they do provide some pollinators, maybe some storage, but it's probably worth, I know for a while there, this board did not feel rain gardens was appropriate, but I'm willing to give it a try for a year. So anybody else have a comment on the docket? Go ahead.
Yes, I'm in favor of approving it. And I know when we have our educational programs, it's often that people will listen to it. They realize that they have a role on their lot or their lake property or what it may be. And so when they learn that a rain garden can help decrease that erosion, and then they get interested also if they learn that you can put pollinator-friendly plants that make the area look attractive. People that way sort of get engaged in this whole process. we're all working on. So it's something where you try and retain the water on your property, which is helpful, and you put many of those together, it will start having a little impact. But it's the community engagement that is very important as well. So I'm in favor of it. It's a very small amount, but I think it goes a long way. And it also supports very much what the Soil and Water Conservation District does extremely well in many different ways.
Is that a motion?
Yes, please.
A motion to approve? Okay, second by Frank. Any other discussions on the Scott SWCD Professional Service Agreement? Matt?
I think the use of their services to supplement areas where don't have the staffing levels, the permitting is far outweighs some of the other issues on rain gardens and things, and I think that's a good community service, since everyone knows my position on rain gardens.
Okay, with any other comments on this? I assume you guys are ready to vote. All in favor of this agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Not hearing, the motion carried 5-0. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to go to an education outreach plan for 2023. Who has this?
Thank you, President Loney and Board of Managers. I'm just going to do a very brief overview of our education and outreach plan for 2023. Some of the overall purposes of our education and outreach program are to improve the understanding of local water resources for our district stakeholders. They also help fulfill our goals laid out in our water resources management plan. At a practical level, education and outreach will often fulfill requirements outlined in permits or grants. And another goal that we're really focusing on this year is to establish the district as a known and trusted part of the community. The goal being that when we approach someone for a project or anything else, that's not the first time they're hearing about us. We have a long list of partners, and I won't read all of them for you. But in general, we work with local cities, townships, various county government agencies, lake associations, and schools. Some of our citizen engagement is going rather than singular events, things like our farmer-led council, our advisory committee, and then various volunteer coordination for things like our CARP espionage program and our citizen-assisted monitoring program, or CAMP, which is where we have volunteers take water quality samples on lakes. Some highlights from 2022, just want to bring up a few of them. We had our Growing Healthy Soils events in January and March of last year, and those were in partner with Scott Soil and Water. And then we also wanted to highlight our CARP espionage program. This is not the first year that we did it, of course. Just wanted to make mention of it because there were a couple times in 2022 where we got notification to in-stream removals. So it was a good show of it having a direct impact on our work. We also had a vegetation identification seminar. That was in partnership with the Spring Lake Association, and we had Steve McComas come and do a really great talk on vegetation identification and the impact of AIS. There was also some storm drain stenciling in 2022. We had a few members of the CAC go out, and they tackled quite a few storm drains, so that was good. And then we also had Starry Trek this year, or last year rather, and that was getting some volunteers together to look through some of our local lakes in search of starry stonewort, which we do not want to find, just in case you were unaware. And then looking forward into 2023, at kind of our overall strategy, like I said, we want to increase the awareness in general of not only of our presence and what we do, but also how we can add value to the community. And we also want to take extra care this year to collaborate with the Scott Clean Water Education Program, or SCWEP or SHWEP, They already have a lot of established events, programs, and workshops, and we see lots of opportunities to sort of add to that and build upon programs already established and successful. We also want to take care to be very targeted in our outreach this year and have quality goals for our outreach and make sure that we understand who our audience is doing outreach events. And generally, we are going to group our outreach efforts to lakeshore residents, urban residents, or rural residents. Different populations have different needs and different impacts. So just some examples of how we would address shoreline residents. One is a tentatively scheduled shoreline workshop in partnership with SQEP, and that's just another example of partnering with someone who's already got an established program going. So by partnering, I mean we would maybe go and present and add a little bit more detail on some district-specific needs or initiatives, and then also provide them with any sort of background data that they might need or might be useful. An example of how we might address urban residents is to focus obviously less on shoreline restoration and more on things like illicit discharge. Some areas that Scott Soil and Water focus on, and we think is also a good focus, is things like pet waste and leaves. And then also another idea that was brought recently that we think is great from SWEP is a safe salting demo, so essentially showing really do need to be using, because it's always less than you think. So that would be something good to do at like a tabling event, for example, something like a farmer's market. And then with our rural residents, we would continue to work with Scott SWCD. They hold cover crop workshops, and then we could present there as well and kind of resource for rural residents as well. And then obviously we have our farmer-led council involvement, and that will continue into 2023 as well. We'll present at those meetings as needed and continue to participate in the Lake Friendly Farms Awards. And the next ones that we'll have will be in March this year. Some other 2023 events that necessarily fall into a specific category are the vegetation event that I mentioned from 2022. It was well attended and well received, so we're partnering with Spring Lake Association and Steve McComas to do that again this year in July. And then we are going to resume participating in SQEP's outdoor education. It's an easy way to reach a large volume of students. And then we do more routine things like publishing articles, social media posts, and then presenting at meetings as that's requested. And we already have planned to present to the Prior Lake Association, Spring Lake Association, Spring Lake Township, and City of Prior Lake. Any questions?
Any questions from anybody? Christian?
Yes, so thank you, Elizabeth. And I, just as an example, I think if we can publicize in articles, newspaper, and so on, some of the accomplishments of the watershed district and how it has made a difference, like in the example of your carp management program. We talked about this sudden late outlet structure and how it actually has met a goal. So communicate that to the community, and I would almost also say to even to the Prior Lake City staff, the leaders of the city, so that they are aware of that, which I'm sure they are, but make sure they are aware of it. Again, restating the water quality achievements, which are significant for Upper Prior Lake and for Spring Lake. You know, things like that are very significant accomplishments. And maybe you have already reported it, but I think it's worth almost restating it. So.
Frank, you have a question.
I see the biggest line item difference is website update, right?
Oh yeah, a slide on that would probably have been super great.
Is that a professional firm?
Yeah.
By contract, et cetera?
Yeah, so we are going to be doing a big website revamp this year that is in the budget. Our website just a bit outdated. So that's just goes into the education budget.
Thank you.
That was one of my questions. This is a big document, something similar we had last year. Could we get a summary sometime of what changed or what's new? Like, the website was new, and that would have been nice to have, because I can't, I read this, it's a great document, so I always look at it and go, well, what's changed this year?
Sure, yeah, it is pretty similar. I think this year our focus was we didn't want to necessarily put a ton of staff time into reading this document just because it is
Yeah.
a more general guideline. But maybe next year, yeah, if it's another year with very minimal changes, we could find a way to point that out.
Okay. Any other questions by the board members? Okay, I need a motion here to approve. I think that's, you want to approve the plan.
So moved.
Motion by Frank, second by Christian on the motion to approve the 2023 Outreach and Education Plan. Any more discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All motion carried, 5-0. Okay. Next we have the Spring Lake Association request to treat curly leaf pondweed within 150 feet of shore.
President Loney and managers. So at our meeting last month, Mr. Stefan brought forward a proposal or a request for the watershed district to treat curly leaf pondweed within 150 feet of shore, and then brought forward that request to staff, and managers requested that staff evaluate it and provide a recommendation. And with that request, the Spring Lake Association was very generous in terms of offering some in our existing aquatic vegetation management policy. We had expressed, staff had expressed in that policy some of the challenges of doing treatment within 150 feet of shore. One of those reasons that was explained was the requirement that if you're going to treat within 150 feet of shore, that you then need residents' approval to do so. There is another process. You can do an opt-out notification. And Spring Lake Association offered to facilitate that opt-out notification process associated with this. In addition, Spring Lake Association offered to cover the cost of the pre-treatment delineation that would occur within the 150 feet of shoreline. And then the big ask was, once again, for the district to fund the actual treatment of the curly leaf pondweed within 150 feet of shore. The district's aquatic management plan policy specifically states that the district will not treat curly leaf pondweed within 150 feet of shore. And while some of the explanations provided were very willingly addressed by Spring Lake Association, staff does believe that other kind of reasons why the district would not, go forward with this, primarily in terms of effort that would be needed to be expended by staff to coordinate that effort, and in particular correspondence with individual landowners, should those landowners disagree with how the delineation was occurred, how it happened, or there are times when the treatment is not effective, and so we could anticipate some discussions and hearing correspondence back and forth should that be the case. In addition, the district right now does fund our curly leaf pondweed treatment based on a DNA that we currently received and grants that we receive through Scott County. And if we expanded the treatment of curly leaf pondweed within 150 feet of shoreline, we would not have adequate grant funding to cover that treatment. We need to use levy dollars to perform that treatment if we did that. And while this is also a request by Spring Lake Association, decide to move forward with treating curly leaf pondweed on Spring Lake, it would then also open the precedent of other lakes within the district to ask for a treatment as well. Once again, further creating additional levy burden for the district. And once again, I guess the last thing I would like to highlight is that through staff correspondence with DNR staff, it is our understanding that the DNR holds the position that public organizations such as the Watershed District should not be treating vegetation within 150 feet of shoreline, that really is, from the DNR's perspective, the responsibility of the individual property owners. So with that, while staff truly appreciates the offer by Spring Lake Association to try to address and accommodate some of the reasonings that were explained why the district wouldn't move forward with doing a treatment within 150 feet, we still feel that staff recommend that the district adhere to our current aquatic management plan. And I guess the last statement is, should managers decide to move forward with treatment, we would then have to amend the policy itself as well.
Okay, thank you, Joni. And I assume, Wes, you want to say something? Yeah, yes, go ahead. We want to hear from you.
So, I've only been on the lake for 3 years, and I do not have a whole lot of perspective, but I have done. And fortunate for the watershed, there is a lot of historical information buried within the data through the years as what's taking place on Spring Lake. Going back to the year 2000, there was 180 acres of curly-leaf pondweed that was present on Spring Lake. Starting in 2002, there was mechanical harvesting evaluated along with herbicide treatment as well. In addition to that, based on the information I uncovered, the herbicide treatment also covered individual shorelines. There was a coordinated effort between the watershed, shore owners, and the associations to address the issue with curly-leaf pondweed. What's not clear to me is exactly who paid for what back then. In talking with the previous association president, Jim Windiger, he believes that there was between the watershed paid for the offshore and some type of a shared responsibility between the association and the shore owners. In 2007, a letter was actually sent out by the watershed to shore owners saying the watershed was not going to address the curly leaf, but if you wanted to as a shore owner, you could actually submit your name and get on a list for treatment for your area. One of the things we struggle with is since the does not respect boundaries, it's hard to stop at 150 feet, not go to shore. So there's a lot of areas in our lake that's not being evaluated or delineated. We know exactly what the extent of the problem was. So when I made the proposal to our board, the first thing to do is delineate the shoreline area to see how active or how curly-leaf pondweed there was. From there, we could go forth to figure out, okay, how do we go forward to address this? The current policy that was established last July, and I appreciate a policy because you can't really fix something or change something unless you have something to start with. So I appreciate the policy that was created. And given the logistic challenge of notifying shore owners, we went through that process last year with the Eurasian water milfoil. A group of us got together, we printed off 215 letters, and we mailed them out. It took about 2 hours. We had 2 people respond back saying they did not want any Eurasian water milfoil treated in their area. In addition to that, the same logistic challenge that's presented by watershed staff is also the same logistic challenge that's presented to shore owners in terms of treating the area that's their responsibility within 150 feet. The effort to delineate, organize treatment companies on an individual basis, and arrange a treatment, if required, happens usually at the most ineffective time of the year for curlyleaf pondweed. It happens in late June, which is too late. The reason that we reached out to the watershed district to coordinate, evaluate, and coordinate the treatment, as this is the best use of resources, cost, and effectiveness. This coordination approach is also something that's in practice in Scott County, on Lake O'Dowd, and also on Cedar Lake. Scott County actually sends out opt-out letters to shore owners of record. They schedule the delineation, they schedule the treatment. The cost for that treatment is also covered by a grant, and it's also covered by what's called a Lake Improvement District, which I believe is somewhat similar to what our levy is. I guess I would ask on behalf of the staff and the board to consider the proposal from the Spring Lake Association in a positive manner. And if the answer is no due to policy reasons, reconsider the current policy and allow us to coordinate our efforts with the watershed district and look for alternative approaches. Thank you. I'll take questions if you'd like.
Any questions for Mr. Steffen? So if I understand your proposal, Wes, you need to do some opt-out letter to the residents, and you need to do some delineation.
Correct.
And that you guys would do that. The association would do that.
We've already talked with Steve McComas to figure out what the cost would be we would piggyback off of the delineation that Steve would do for the watershed, which is the offshore delineation. In addition to that, Steve would use his information to go ahead and delineate the areas close to shore. And we are willing to pay for that this year to figure out what should be the approach going forward.
So are you asking for us to put down there 150 feet?
If there is a treatment required, yes.
Okay, I think I understand the proposal. I guess one option I was thinking of, having dealt with city policy before many years, okay, maybe we have the resource, the contractor, when you have the delineator, if you get the delineation done and the contractor was willing to come in and do the work, and then he could say who's to pay, if you would collect the money from the property owners. I mean, if they want to do it, they still can do it on their own, but having it done on a volume basis, contractor, I think our staff is saying it's too much work for them to go around and do the delineation. We wouldn't be interested in having them pay, because that just gets to be an accounting problem. And it probably would be a problem for you too as well.
So in talking with the company that did obviously I got the opportunity to spend a lot of time with Patrick Seltzer from PLM because of the Eurasian water milfoil grant that we received last year. And he said, he would be able to separate out the shoreline treatment areas that were delineated, as well as the offshore information, if we needed to go down the path of separate billing. So,
yeah, I mean, that would accomplish what you want to accomplish, it's just
Correct.
who pays for it?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Any thoughts from anybody else?
If I could offer one other thing too, you know, in talking with Jim Whittaker, it was a cost share approach back in early 2000s. It's not totally clear to me if I should pick up any of the $150 cost or not, or $150 area or not. The association did kick in some money. I believe also the landowners kicked in some additional money on top of that.
Frank, do you have a question?
Well, more point. First of all, thank you that the Spring Lake Association accomplishes each and every year. We're grateful for all of your activities. And if our response is in the negative, please don't misinterpret. We're not ungrateful for what you do. However, in my mind at least, the staff argument, one, of the amount of time this could take, times the number of lakes that it would apply to, the precedents, convinces me that it's not a waiver of policy that I could support at this time. Is it something we could look at in future years, contemplating that maybe it's a good thing that it's on other lakes? Certainly we could do that, but to me, for the time being, at least for this year, it seems to me we should abide by the policy, and that's a motion to that effect.
Okay. Any second to that motion? Yeah, the motion is not, I'll second it for discussion. How's that? Okay, so let's have some discussion on the motion. Obviously, you're not in favor of moving ahead, or do you have some other thoughts?
I'm sensitive to our policies, and I think the policy warrants reviewing. I don't know if I'm ready to move forward this evening on this, but trying to use, as I might think, purchasing, the cost is one thing, and how they should be spread out. I would opt more towards the lakeshore owners contributing, but how they can't piggyback off of what we're already doing, I'd like to find a way where they can take essentially, as I see it, Wes, as a volume discount. You have people there in 150 feet. Why can't we just get to shore? And so us, the district, supporting the cost of that, wouldn't be in favor of, but figuring out a way to do it in a volume basis for the lakeshore owners, I think warrants some further discussion, is where I sit on this.
Yeah, and I think Wes did some legwork, meeting with the contractor, that he'd be willing to do that work while he's out there. It's just a matter of, how he gets paid.
I'm not insensitive to the cascading effect to other lake shores and essentially setting precedents that we have down, but there's been a lot of work done, and I think it warrants how we look at our policies and how we put something that would be consistent to other water bodies.
Good point. Anybody else want to comment on the motion is to adhere to the policy, current policy. So.
You died for lack of a second.
No, I second it.
Oh, you did.
Yeah. So we can vote it down if that's what the motion is. So is there any more discussion on the motion? Any more discussion? I'm not hearing any. So all in the favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Did you say anything? Did you guys vote for it or not? Did you say nothing? Okay, Maybe we should do a show of hands. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Not in favor of the motion, raise your hand.
I don't like the motion.
Okay. Okay, you can say no, just say no. It's okay to say no. It's been voted down because we don't have a third vote. Okay, the motion fails.
I thought I saw Christian vote. Did you have your hand up?
Yes.
Oh, did you vote yes?
Then that was.
Okay, okay.
For discussion, I will say is I agree with all the discussion essentially, including your comment, you know, that if we can work on, see how can we find a win-win solution down the road. But I voted yes for the motion.
Okay, so that motion passed. We're going to adhere to this district policy right now. Now, you can do another motion if you want us to look at the current policy for the future, if you want to do that. That's a good motion. I mean, that's a follow-up motion to this item.
I motion to review the policy
Okay?
for future discussion.
We have a second motion and second to review the policy for the future. Any discussion on that?
Is there a timeline?
I don't know.
There is a timeline. It may not satisfy this year.
Yeah, probably won't getting done this year, but for future years, we'll look at it. Okay? Ben?
I assume that would also cover any budget as well on that policy review.
I think that's a good assumption, isn't it, Joni? Yeah. When they look at the policy, they'd also bring back the budget impacts and anything else with that.
I think I would need additional input from staff as to how the policy would work to minimize the impact, because that's what I'm hearing. One of the issues that it'll, I don't want to use the word overly burden them, but we have limited resources. How do we use those? And so part of this would be the expectations on what each party was going to do and make sure it was well defined. And I think we need staff's input into that, where they don't end up on the wrong end of resource allocation for that.
And I would like to make Spring Lake Association and West in particular here doing a lot of the legwork. And I mean, sometimes we talk about precedent, and my thought is this: if we got additional grant funding to do additional Curly Pond removal, and associations did the same legwork as we require in a policy, that's good precedent. Okay, so if the other lakes like Fish Lake and Prior Lake, they want to do the same thing, if that's the policy direction, they know that, okay, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do in order for this policy to kick in. So we're not, okay, one of the concerns is we do have 3 other lakes that we have to potentially look at. Well, they might come in and say, well, we want our lake done, we want our lake done. So again, the policy needs to address, if we move in that direction, this is what you have to do as a lake association in order for us to move forward. That's just my one thought and discussion. I remember the motion again. I think the motion is correct.
The motion is to review the policy with staff
Okay.
input.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Not seeing any, hearing any. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried 5-0. Okay. All right, Wes. Yeah.
We appreciate the efforts on what the Lake Association is trying to do, and we want to appreciate that and see if we can't work together.
Yep. Okay. Well, we're going to move on to another item. Treasurer's report. Christian Morkenberg.
Yes, thank you. Overall, we are in good standing. We have our 2023 budget is outlined in where you can see it in the general fund and the implementation fund. General, in terms of the actual expenditures, as we discussed before, the general fund is the more up-to-date one. We have expenses like salaries and rent that are predictable and we pay every month, whereas the implementation fund is often delayed to accounting. But as you can see today, as an example, we have our claims list where you will see the expenditures that we'll get next month. We have the expenditures from last month that we will approve today and then pay. We have an increased amount of restricted and committed funds this year, and that's self-imposed, and these are committed to things like the Prior Lake Outlet Channel, the Upper Watershed Blueprint activities, and future alum treatments. As a new thing here, we have all our funds at the 4M Bank, and it's working. We are doing electronic, which is wonderful. We are keeping an eye on our cash flow throughout the year. Right now, we have a sort of prediction for what it will look like, but it will be closely followed throughout the year. President Loney commented last time about the disparity between the levy amount and the amount we received, and that we received less than we had levied for, and we explained that part of that is residual taxes, and the good news is already in this month we received an additional 15,000 of residual taxes for last year. We will to get a new year-end financial statement for 2022 in March at our board packet, and also start the audit probably in mid-March. And that's my summary. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? I think it's a good report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Way to keep up on the dollars there. So our next item is the consent agenda. We have quite a few items on the consent. It's routine administrative items, and some items can be removed at the request of a board member, staff member, or member of the audience. So I'm just going to read the items here. Special meeting minutes, January 7th, 2023. Meeting minutes, January 10th, 2023, board workshop. Meeting minutes, January 10th, 2023, board meeting. Meeting minutes, December 8th, 2022, CAC meeting. Claims list and visa expenditure summary. 2023 watershed base implementation funding grant agreement. 6.7 is Swamp Lake phosphorus and peak flow reduction feasibility study contract. Fish Lake management plan update work order. Eyelid repurchase agreement. Sutton I-enhanced sand filter follow-up work order. Flood storage engagement work order. District engineer master service agreement with their 2023 rate schedule. And then a carp management equipment funding request. Does anybody want to take any items off the agenda, or do somebody to approve?
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve by Ben, second by Matt. There's no discussion on a consent agenda, so all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, 5-0. Next thing, we have update meeting and event schedule. The CAC meeting will meet Thursday, February 23rd at 6:30 at Prior Lake City Hall here. We'll have a Prior Lake Outlet Channel Cooperatives meeting on Thursday, February 16th starting at noon here at Prior Lake City Hall. Board of Managers workshop will be next Tuesday, March 14th at 4 p.m. Board of Managers Tuesday, March 14th at 6 p.m. And then there's a Lake Friendly Farm Certification Award event, which is Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. I'd like to just point out that I will be gone for the month of March and April, and Vice President Boyles will be taking over, so I'm leaving you in good hands. So,
Better, okay.
That's one man's.
Yeah, there won't be on that, you mean? Okay, so I just need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
A motion by Christian,
Second.
all in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned at 7:41. Thank you, everybody.